For more on this, we are now being joined by Adel Nazarian, Senior Media Fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy from Washington, D.C. Adel, welcome back to WION. Is the former president gaining ground on Kamala Harris?
Oh, he definitely is. It's great to be on with you again. You know, he's as of October, mid-October, it's so close to the down to the wire. He has gained, ground in several key battleground swing states, right? You have Michigan leading Harris by 3 points. You have in Florida and Arizona, which you just mentioned, which has increased obviously to 6 points versus two, respectively for Harris there. But the thing here is that Harris also still holds a narrow lead in other crucial states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Nevada, but they are within the margin of error, right? And I remember whenever I was in 2016 campaigning, covering, the Bernie Sanders campaign, then Hillary Clinton, and the Pence-Trump campaign. And I remember just the efforts that Trump was making in these key battleground states, whereas Hillary Clinton wasn't taking the advice of Bill and she wasn't going into these states, and you could just see the massive difference that it made. I know Kamala is now doing the same thing. She's trying to take on the same tactic, but I think she's actually done herself more injustice with her recent TV interviews, which is why they've been trying to keep her out of the media spotlight. I think it's hurt her more than helped her, honestly. So I think it's very, very close, but Trump definitely is gaining momentum.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see it. It appears that it's the issue of abortion that is the only issue that she's leading with, and that's with young women only. Moving on, a YouGov poll says that a quarter of Americans believe that there is a possibility of civil war. How do you see such sentiment less than 2 weeks into the polling days?
You know, okay, civil war, of course, the country has never been more divided than it is currently. And I think that the notion that civil war would take place, to be frank, yeah, it's a possibility, of course. The reasons, though, would be different under each administration. I think under Trump, if he were to win, I think honestly the likelihood of a civil war would be less likely. But I do think that if it were to occur, it would come from the far left, progressive, anarchist kind of faction, the more violent Antifa, let's say, associated affiliates, which we've seen, unfortunately, demonstrating these acts of self-immolation, in the nation's capital, throughout the country. I think that's the more likely origin of a civil war from if Trump wins. If Kamala Harris wins, though, I think that it would be less violence from the right, to be honest with you. I think we've seen the media, propagandize and kind of inflate right-wing kind of, unrest and violence, which we saw in the Capitol Hill incident as well. But I do have to say that I think a civil war might be more likely under a Kamala Harris presidency because it's more likely that the wars will continue, whereas under a Trump presidency, wars would be ended. He would do everything to finish the wars that the world is currently engaged in, the U.S. is currently engaged in. And I think that under a Harris administration, it would be a continuation of President Biden's policies, which includes a lot of neocon stances. And I think that in fact, the wars would continue and probably even increase. And I think that's probably the reason why there may be civil war. There may be a scenario like in Vietnam, honestly, where God forbid they would reinstate a draft. And I think that's kind of the scenario where I think a civil war would occur under a Kamala Harris presidency. But I don't think that if Trump were to lose, there would necessarily be violence and civil unrest, although I definitely think it's really close this time, and the likelihood of him, winning or losing by a big margin is very, very unlikely. So let's just hope that everyone can, maintain calm and peace no matter what happens.
Yeah, not just after the elections, just almost less than 2 weeks until the election. We see someone like Kamala Harris take the stand behind the podium and once again call him a fascist and unhinged and whatnot. And we know how dangerous that rhetoric has been so far on the life of the former president and the challenges that Secret Service have really on defending him and protecting him at this point. So, hoping for the best, as you mentioned. Adele, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.